Sorry, just warming up. This has to be a good episode because I'm speaking with my singing teacher, so she's going to listen to this and criticize me a lot. Welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford, and I interview inspiring people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. That was okay, yeah? So this is a special episode for me because, speaking to my teachers, because I'm trying to improve every aspect of this podcast. So that's why I started getting lessons. I use my voice a lot in every aspect of the production. And when I thought about lessons, I wondered who to get. And I remembered an article in the newspaper a few years ago about these two ladies who'd rediscovered the old way to sing. It doesn't put any strain on the voice. It was an article about Adele damaging her voice from the way she was singing. But it's more than that. It's all about adding warmth into the voice, singing naturally. You don't take a big deep breath in when you start singing, just like you haven't heard me breathing now. It's just the diaphragm goes up, these tiny little breaths. So that was a big insight. So it's just building on the natural tone. They're completely unlike any other singing teachers. And if you're a singer, this could be a mind-blowing episode for you. We chat for almost 2 hours, so it's pretty long. But I've left it unedited because I think this is one for posterity. And they will cause a revolution in classical singing once their technique gets more widely known. So please enjoy some quality time with Lisa Paglin and Marianna Brilla. I was just rereading the article that originally drew me to you, along with many other people. No, it was a very well-written article.
Yeah, Bernard Warner's a good writer.
He's wonderful. He has he's quite successful in his field.
Let's say there are two misunderstandings in the article. It's not really
more,
two sort of ones that stick out for us.
A couple of mistakes.
Yeah, that they're not really his fault because he didn't get a chance before it ended up in the Guardian to really proofread it. They were rushing it through so quickly. They were very enamored of the piece. And so one thing, which is minor, but only singers would notice, or musicians, I suppose, is when he came to hear some lessons in the studio. We were working, and he listened to one of our students at the time, and he said that she was a dramatic soprano singing an opera called Don Pasquale, and anybody that's in opera would know that that's not possible, and that nobody does do that dramatic sopranos don't sing Don Pasquale, but he didn't know because it's not his field, and he had the chance to check it with us or ask us. That was one thing.
We never read the draft.
No, which is fine, but neither did he in the end. I mean, he read the draft, but then they were so happy with this article. They said, quick, and so they put it to press without talking to him again. And that was one mistake. And if any opera singer would read that, they go, what? What kind of teachers are these that would be having a dramatic soprano sing Don Pasquale? That's ridiculous. The other thing is, he asked Marianna it was a very involved question about what happened and how we got to this point of decline in the use of the voice in classical music. And as she was explaining it, he took a lot of notes, of course. And when he wrote the answer, he said that we laid the blame on the shoulders of Wagner, Verdi, and Puccini. And that's not true. That's not what we said. We didn't mean that. He might have heard that. That was a misunderstanding. And I actually wrote a little rebuttal, and it was published in The Guardian as a letter to the editor. Because it was later, I called Bernard and I said, help, this is not right. Something has to be done. And The Guardian said to me to write something. So I did. I wrote a very small little article, which they published, and some people did see it. And we did get a little bit of response from some classical singers. They said, how could you say that? It's not true at all. And it's not the fault of the composers. They didn't do anything, and we wanted to clarify that, but, it was not possible to write another article at the time.
was so rushed. Everything was pressed, I guess, because of Adele and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
That, and I'll never do this again. I want to see what's written before we give the okay, you know.
Well, sometimes journalists won't allow that, and that's their prerogative, and that's okay. They don't have to let you see it, you know. But we needed to talk it over a little bit more. That's all.
Well, what do you do when, in a case like this, there are several errors that were not permissible? Okay, you make an error, a small error, it's one thing, but several would not really. It was not correct, you know.
Well, if some facts are wrong, newspapers will often write a little rebuttal. But in this case,
you wrote that.
I wrote something. But in this case, it was let's say it's an opinion. They won't rewrite that part. You know.
However, Bernard is after us. He wants to do something else.
He's a good writer.
This is not over yet, is what it says.
Maybe you didn't realize how big the piece would be, how printed in many other newspapers worldwide. Did you receive like 10,000 emails? Was that right? Something like that?
22,000 the day after.
Yeah, the next day.
And then just hundreds and hundreds of messages are coming in constantly. Yeah. We could not. We hired like 5 people to help take care of them. We never did. We never finished them.
Yeah. It was all kinds of. There were all kinds of different people writing in. Most of them were people who were asking for help with their own voices.
Yeah.
Some of them were people who were writing to just wish us well and say what a great article and how interesting. We really didn't get any negative emails. There were a couple of negative responses I noticed on the website, but very rare. Unusually, you'd think most people get quite defensive about a piece like this, but they didn't. They were very positive, which was surprising. But what overwhelmed us was the amount of pain among singers. So many people writing and saying, "Can you help?" You know.
Did I tell you, Jack, that Hollywood called us? Did I tell you that?
Yes, but tell me again. That's a great story.
That was rather insane. I don't know if we could talk about this on a podcast. I
right.
We shouldn't.
Are we on a podcast? No, I didn't know.
No, we're going to be important for one. So, no, I don't think that we should talk about that.
No, well, we didn't want to do it anyway. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, they were excited. I think these people in Hollywood are excited about let's say, the story without knowing the details of the story. You know, sort of like a Marigold Hotel kind of idea, maybe.
Yes.
Old women living in a small town in Italy. It sounded eccentric and quirky and fun, but actually there's more to it, you know.
It wouldn't be a serious movie like that, not with that style.
No.
But I liked the beginning of how the encounter. I don't know if I told you about that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, the 3 of us, we didn't know Bernard, of course, at that point, but we had to go to the American Embassy in Rome for a passport renewal. And he had to go also. And they didn't allow many people in the waiting room.
Yeah.
This was before COVID. But they only allowed 3 people in the waiting room.
For security.
For security reasons. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at each other, you know. I wonder who they are, who he is.
I didn't even notice him.
And then I said, "What? Where are you from? Why are you in Rome?" I said, something like that. I said, "Do you live here?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, why do you live here?" You know, young American guy, red-blooded. You think he's not going to be living in Italy, you know, on his own, unless he was a painter or a professor of some of the arts. And he said, "Well, I'm married to a Roman woman." Oh, I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I said, "Well, what do you do here? Do you work here?" And he said, "I'm a journalist." And I said, "Oh, I got a story for you." And he, "Well, yeah." He said, "What do you do?" I said, we work on voices." And he said, I said, "If you have 10 minutes, I'll tell you something." And he said, "Yeah. Let's go to have a coffee after we get this business done." So we went for coffee, and we were there. It wasn't 10 minutes. We were there about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And he said, "This is unbelievable. This is fantastic." And he called his editor, and the editor said, "Okay, let's go with this. This is something unbelievable."
At the time, I don't even know which paper he was proposing it to, because he writes
It was for the. For the woman, it was for the Guardian.
Yeah, I don't know if that was.
He told me that. Anyway, which one would have been before?
I don't know. He was a freelance at the time, so I don't know.
Oh, he was working for the.
Okay, well, anyway. but it's very interesting because he doesn't write about music, and we asked him why he found it so interesting, because really, I mean, his work is very sort of dramatic and involved in much more life and death experiences than ours. And he said he was fascinated by it, and that this was about singing, and to him, singing is human, and he just thought that it was an incredible story. The years of research and the work we were doing to fight the status quo and try to save children from ruining their voices. He also has 2 small kids, and I think he related to it in some way, as most little girls, when we first met, they were all singing that horrific song from Frozen. Everyone was belting it out. And he got really interested. It was fascinating getting to know him.
You should meet him. He's a terrific guy.
Yeah.
Real open. His mentality is so open to everything, anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's interested in everything.
And did he know before speaking what an epidemic is with the surgery for the singers?
No,
he didn't know.
He had no idea.
He did a lot of research on it, as you can see from the article. He really interviewed a lot of people.
I might have said this too, though. We were talking about, I mean, our field is opera, but we do work with actors, and we work with pop singers, rock singers. We work with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But our specialty is opera singers, which is the most difficult. And so then he did a little research on his own. He wanted to know how many opera singers were out there, because we said so many of them have had surgery. Not only vocal problems that they may have corrected with their, the speech therapists and stuff, but it would be only corrected temporarily. The speech therapist would not really know how the breath really works in relationship to the tone. So they would be okay for a while, and then after 2 or 3 operas, they would go back to their speech therapist. In fact, they call one of the most famous speech therapists in Italy, he had so many clients that he called them athletes of the stage, expecting to get injured and then going to your doctor, then getting back on stage, which is nonsense.
No.
He could not fix them. But then Bernard called this super famous doctor, I don't know if he's, I think American, in New York or Boston or somewhere, who was taking care of a lot of major opera singers. If somebody was sick who had a major career, they would end up going to this doctor who was probably unbelievably expensive. And Bernard called him directly, and he said, just give me, like, who are you working on? And he would say,
of course,
you can't reveal this, but I'll tell you. Well, and then Bernard said, well, how many singers have you worked on this year? He said, I can't give you their names, but I have done 700 major opera singers in this year alone with surgery. Bernard couldn't believe it. I said, yeah, that's the way it is now. You know, it's all over the world like that, at least in the world where there is opera, this type of singing.
Yeah, most people don't admit to it, although it's become more common now. So
most people don't admit to what?
To having had surgery. No, to having had surgery.
Oh, they won't. No.
Yeah.
They think that would be bad for their careers.
Yeah, although it's become more common, so some people actually did allow the press to talk about that, you know.
Well, it was Adele had success, didn't she? She had 2 surgeries, and the first one was...
The first one was successful.
For a while.
But it's only temporary.
Then she had to have another one.
So you heard from her that she didn't change her style and that it wouldn't stick. Is that right?
It's not a question of the style. It's the question of the way she functioned.
The approach.
Between the breath and the tone. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And it's still, we analyzed it, of course, even before, just because she was so famous. I happen to love her voice. I think she has a fabulous voice. And I love her personality. I love everything, the feeling, the humanity in her and everything.
Yeah.
But I recognize that she did not understand how to take a tone, how to start a tone.
Could you go into that then? Because in the article it's written by words, but now I've got you on audio here. We can really get into it.
We did not.
No, we couldn't talk about. We
didn't think it was right.
We're sorry to not have helped her. We could. We could still help her if she wanted help, but I think that she decided to not go ahead, you know. But you mean, how would that work?
Yeah, just from
singer?
the different air tone and the words.
All right. If you take a singer who's out of balance and you want to help them, they first of all, they have to be willing to stop for a while and relax so that you can get them to change their approach.
Well, let's just take the common speaking voice.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to a gas station, the guy will come to your window and say, what can I do for you? Well, that's not normal. People don't usually talk like that. Unless maybe his father talked like that and he imitated his father, but that's not really normal. Because everybody's born with good voices unless there's a physical problem, illness.
Yeah.
But then they imitate others, or they try and sing and imitate others. You have to always be yourself. You have to walk at your own pace, talk at your own pace. Your body is an individual body, and your tone is individual too. And that has to be respected. So you can't imitate anybody. It would be incorrect to do that. And in Adele's case, I know she loved in particular the Black American
Mississippi
sound.
Delta
Let's say the sound.
Yeah.
But for that kind of a sound, you got to be black. You got to be black. Or somebody like me, I have very, very heavy features. So I will have some black people mistake me for being black if they don't see me.
Mm-hmm.
They might hear me talking somewhere and they'll say, "Hey, you black?" Or they don't hear the accent though either. So, but they hear a sound that they recognize. If you don't have those features, you're not going to have that sound. Like take the people from Ethiopia. Usually, they're very slender. They're dark. They're slender. They have small features. They have different types of voices. They often have very high voices and light voices. The heavier the body, and I don't mean fat-wise, I mean big bones and thicker skin.
Bigger sinus cavities.
Bigger voice and heavier tone.
But apart from that too, there's also a cultural aspect. I mean, just because you like a certain kind of music, you can't imitate it. You have to be it.
Well, that's another take on the same subject.
It's the same subject. So if you like the music of the Mississippi Delta from 1940, and you want to sound like that, well, I mean, first of all, we're not in 1940, so you'd have to probably study with someone who was from that period at least, or be surrounded by it or immerse yourself in it for a long period of time in order to absorb it naturally and not just apply it like a coat of paint to your voice, which is what a lot of people do in singing today. They have an opera sound or a pop sound or a jazz sound. They change sounds. This is the term they use. I like your sound.
Well, that's already incorrect. You're going to ruin yourself like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incorrect.
You could sing any music, but you have to sing it with your own voice.
Yeah. And that's one of the problems. So the rapport between tone and air, right away is going to be off if you're trying to sound like something rather than just departing from your own natural speaking voice, given that the speaking voice is healthy. We start from there.
Mm-hmm.
Any child that, Marianna was talking about children before, any child that's born healthy will have a naturally balanced voice. And if that child is talented and starts singing and doesn't imitate anyone, and they grow up, they'll continue to sing very beautifully because, we're already built for singing. Singing is natural. We all know how to sing.
Well,
by nature.
I always say we sang before we spoke.
Mm.
Singing being continued tone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Babies always use continued tone. Speaking is not continued tone. It's chopped up because they're words.
Yeah. But if you try to create a sound, you're immediately altering your relationship between your air and your tone. Not to mention then adding the words to it, especially if you're either singing in languages you don't speak, so you don't know how they fit in your mouth, or you're trying to imitate a foreign accent or an accent that you think is cool, and that's another thing that you're doing. You're altering yourself in some way without actually studying this profoundly. There are ways to do everything. I mean, there are character actors who specialize in changing their voices and changing their accents. And the good ones are healthy and they can go from one thing to another and they never injure their voices, but some of them end up injured.
And I think we might have talked about this, Jack. A society can impinge upon how people speak.
Oh, yeah.
The more difficult the society gets, the more we go outside of ourselves, kind of fighting against it. We can't remain inside of ourselves anymore. And I think we talked about the American sound now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, they're not. Your tone has to resonate within your body, so everything's functioning physiologically and acoustically on spot. But what happens is they start, in defense of the society they're living in, they're going to start changing those the physiological functions of it, for one, and then that changes the acoustical function. So they talk like that. That's the American sound now.
It's true.
That's very brash and it's aggressive.
Very aggressive.
It's pushing away. It's not inviting an encounter with your society, with others. It's pushing away. It's defense. And that's generally the tone of today.
So it's too much tone.
It's too much concentration on volume, on
well, it's not contained in your body.
Yeah,
anymore.
it's all externalized.
Yeah.
Rather than our instruments are inside of us. We are vocal instruments. You would never expect another musical instrument to push the sound out. It would be impossible. If you play the piano, which I do, and you play the piano, you don't expect the pianist to push the sound toward the public.
It's contained within the instrument.
It has to resonate in the instrument.
A bassoon sounds like a bassoon. If a bassoon starts to sound like a clarinet or something, you'd say, "What's this guy doing?
What's happening here?" Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You never even consider that in an instrument. The instruments resonate internally, of course, and then what emanates from the instrument is the sound. But singers, of course, because we're more than just an instrument. We are a musical instrument. We're also human beings. We're reciting poetry. We're expected to deliver. Delivery is a part of performance as a singer. It's not. You don't think of that when you play an instrument. And unfortunately, that attitude of delivery has become so exaggerated now and so externalized now that singers are, and actors too, are told to project their voices to the back row. You have to, be heard over who knows an enormous orchestra, and everybody is terrified. They think that to be heard, you have to be loud. And that's not true, because if you are in an acoustical space like an opera house, you can hear a pencil drop on the stage. You can hear a newborn baby just fine. You don't have to be enormously loud. Your voice has to carry, and in order for it to carry, it has to be balanced.
Well, that balancing is not only acoustical, it's physical too, because when somebody talks like that, with that attitude, the way I just talked a second ago, you're not thinking properly either. You're not connected with your thoughts.
That's true.
Your body has to be whole. Your mind and your body work together.
You get very nervous talking about that. Yeah.
And it gives you, this is an interesting thing, because sound waves are real. Any wave, any vibration can either heal or destroy.
Yeah.
If it's irregular, it will destroy whatever it goes through. It will destroy. If it's regular, it will heal you. And those people that are off acoustically because physiologically are pushing at and mentally at a society that is no longer humane, they will eventually have problems. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the sick people that are in a country like United States, which is a battleground practically, battling because nothing is, they don't have insurance, that the health system is not, there's no socialized anything there. Yeah. So they're struggling constantly. Yeah. And they have a lot of illness. And they have to pay the doctors huge amounts of money. I mean, it's just, they're behind the 8 ball, as they say.
Well, if you take singers that do that, actual people that are trying to have a career in singing or students of voice, and they all sing basically concentrating in that way, what I see among the singers that I meet is that they're all half hysterical. They're all very worried about what everybody thinks about them. They're all trying to modify themselves or figure out some way to fit in.
Well, what you're saying is that
they're nervous because they don't trust their own voices.
That these destructive habits lead to not really knowing who you are.
Yeah, that's right.
And you have to, when you have the right acoustical and physiological approach, you get to start knowing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most important thing in life. If you're going to go through life, if you're going to be getting married and having children and raising a family and everything. If you don't know who you are, how the hell are the kids going to know who they are? It's just a
Your question, Jack, about the relationship between air and tone, right?
Yeah.
And we started out talking about that and the and what we would do to help a person, like say Adele. It could be anyone, though. We'd love to help her.
Oh, with her, it would be real easy to fix her.
Yeah.
Real easy.
As long as she was willing, or any singer has to be willing to sort of relax about what they want, about their goals. Sometimes ambition can be a good thing, but it has to be in its right place, because what happens with a lot of singers is they want the results right away. And what they don't understand is when you hear a really excellent singer, what you're hearing on the outside is not what they're doing on the inside. That's something else. You're hearing a result of a balanced voice. They're not making that sound. And what people do now is they try to create the result without actually going through the process. So the relationship between air and tone is actually really simple. How they go off is usually wanting a certain kind of a sound is a major problem.
Imitation.
Wanting a lot of volume is another big problem. And therefore, engulfing the voice, or like flooding the engine with air, taking large quantities of air and pushing it all through the voice.
You know what this reminds me of, how you're describing this? And it happens with women in particular. They want the mouth of Sophia Loren.
Oh, I see what
but they want the nose of, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. And they go and they get their faces and they get all this stuff on from the outside. And they don't
my goodness.
They all look alike, boy, in the end. You can tell, they've had plastic surgery.
Yes. Oh, I see.
They start to put the same chin, the same cheeks, the same, they look like false faces.
Well, actually, that's an interesting analogy, because what we hear now in the world of singing, whether it's pop or opera, is that everyone sounds alike.
Yes.
They do.
And one of the reasons for that is because they're all imitative. You can only sound like yourself if you sound like yourself. And I think it's always extremely attractive when you hear a person who does sound like an individual, who's talking straight to you when they're singing a song. You hear their words, you hear their meaning, you hear the sincerity. Today, we can actually hear some singers whose words you can understand. Rarely, because most of the time you can't. But when you can hear them, they still don't have any meaning. They're just shapes. They're not really, they're trying. I mean, God knows, we love singers. We know what they're going through. And they try awfully hard. And they work so hard at it too. They take diction classes and they try to pronounce more, and because they know their words should be clear.
They take fencing.
They'll do everything. They play tennis, whatever they can do. They try to build themselves up, and they're always talking about it. They're talking about doing Feldenkrais or getting psychotherapy or going to jaw specialists to stretch their jaws and their throats. And you can't possibly imagine.
By the way, there are people that help them stretch.
This is a new thing, yeah.
And I remember years ago, one boy I knew went and had his jaws stretched and knocked the jaw off its axis. So he
couldn't close his mouth. He had to go to the hospital.
Yeah, he had to go to the hospital to get it reset.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's tremendous abuse.
So you're saying they're looking outside for the solution?
That's right. They're all looking for everything.
Well, this is is... In Italian, you would say annientato. It's the individual that's negated in the society.
Annientato, negated. I suppose
negated.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. So what is going to bring a person to himself? Intense study of anything will bring you to yourself, but it has to be really good study.
Also,
and then you'll finally start to learn who you are.
Yeah.
That's like going through the eye of a needle.
Also,
It's hard work. It's not superficial at all.
No, that's right. That's right. It isn't. Also, abandon, which is very difficult, especially when you're young. We know that, just to stop and hold still for a few minutes, And
any part of any great teaching would already start with that principle.
Yeah, you have to start there. Yeah.
Not trying to do.
What I see all around me is in singers' forums and letters that we receive and questions we get. It's always looking for tips. Everybody wants gimmicks.
Oh, so Marianna was telling me you can't even go to the opera anymore because you don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a bad restaurant. You stop going. You're not getting what you ordered.
It's an assault on the nervous system, basically.
Not only that, but it is actually, it's not even a question of an opinion or anything. Because the singing is so bad, nobody is really in tune.
Well, yeah.
And that's serious. They're not in tune.
They're not in tune, and we unfortunately can hear what's going on in the throats of the singers, and it's very disturbing.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't go. I don't want to know. I don't go.
They have to put subtitles on as well.
Yeah, they put the subtitles on, But we were talking about that.
Yeah, that's interesting because you might say that it coincides with the let's say, the beginning of the end of the technique. The main thing is to understand the words. The words are the most important thing in a singer's life. And when the words go, well, that would indicate that you're in balance if you can hear your words. And I don't mean have to listen to them. They come out to you. The words are inviting. They're right, like Aretha Franklin. Everything she sings, those words are the most important meaning. A lot of Black Americans still have that. They have always, because they had to talk. That was the way they survived. You look at Billie Holiday. I mean, she abused herself maybe with drugs and things like that, but she was right on target. Marian Anderson, of course, was a classical singer, but it's so unbelievable, beautiful because of her words. Well, the words have saved them.
But I mean, at one time, all singers' words were clear. That they just were. It was, after all, we have the advantage over instruments that we have words, and it's poetry, and we're reciting. That's what they call it.
But where did the words go? I mean, everybody had. What about the Italians that sing now, or the Germans that sing, or the Swedes that sing, or anybody, the Americans that sing? There are no words.
No,
you can't understand anything.
No, and we were saying before, at least I said that even when you can occasionally, rarely hear the words, they usually aren't meaningful because the singer is still too involved in trying to make a sound and be heard through the sound. Everyone's very insecure about that.
Completely out of balance. Yeah.
So anyway, going to the opera, no, that would not be a joy for us. No.
Because it's too much. It's too much tone. Then is it that what you're saying?
It's just incorrect. Completely. It's like I wouldn't go to a bad restaurant.
Well, I mean, when you're saying too much tone, you mean the question is what's wrong with the voices in general?
Yes, technically.
Yeah. Well, generally, it's the sound overwhelming the words. So.
And the sound is incorrect.
The sound is incorrect anyway.
The sound it does not have a real beauty to it. The voices could be very beautiful. They could be very good voices. But when they use them improperly, you can't appreciate it. And so you don't hear the words clearly because the words have to be exactly like the words you hear when I'm talking now.
Right.
You have to hear that. That's the most important thing in singing. And if you hear like this, you're hearing tone, and the tone will never be, they'll either be sharp or flat. They'll never be in tune, which is very annoying.
Oh, it's upsetting, actually. To hear out of tune all the time is physically very upsetting.
And they're also homogenized as well. All the opera singers sound pretty much
They sound the same.
though.
It happens. You can go to an opera, and if you close your eyes, you don't actually know who is singing. You know.
Now, the only little bird's eye view you can get of something that could be quality would be when a lot of people are singing together, they amalgamate, and you do hear the words. And they just happen to amalgamate into a delivery with the words guiding it, and it's beautiful.
You're saying like a non-opera choir.
Or no, even an opera choir,
Really?
like in Va Pensiero. It was very, very impressive.
That performance you
Very
heard, yeah.
impressive. I heard I heard a performance that was recorded with Muti conducting, what is the opera? Nabucco. And the chorus comes in Rome Opera House. I can't remember the year, 85 possibly, 1985. And the chorus was there because the interruption with singing has gone on for a long time. And they amalgamated. It was the beauty of the moment for the patria and all of that. And it was absolutely stunning. La voce del popolo. That's what you want. It's the humanity, and that's been disintegrated now in the art. There's no humanity.
Yeah, communication.
There's no direct communication.
Yeah. It's well, the opera world. I mean, look, I guess most performing is like that. It's over the top in general, you know. So opera, of course, is spectacle. It's a huge theatrical production. So is a lot of musical comedy today, or what do they call it now? They don't call it musical comedy. What do they say? I don't know how you say it in English anymore because they have different. Once a long time ago, something like some of Andrew Lloyd Webber's operas were called rock operas or something. I don't know what they call them now. Musicals, right, they call them in Italian. Musical, I don't know. They do so much with special effects and people flying through the air and, you know, acrobatics and athletics on stage. All of that is to entertain, and there's basically nothing wrong with that, I suppose, except that if you have a singer who has spent years training their voices to sing beautiful, sublime music, just like a violinist who has worked for years to be able to play a violin beautifully, why do you also have to put them, I don't know, on rollerblades 20 meters off the ground? Why can't you just listen to them sing? You know, and there are reasons for this. As singers have had more and more problems communicating directly with their words and their feelings, directors have started taking over and they've started adding more spectacle all the time. So that what you end up, I find, going to an opera is just an assault in general, because there's everything going on stage, but nothing is coming directly to me in not getting the message. Story is being interrupted. And really, a singer just has to tell a story. It's very simple, but it's become extremely complicated.
So what were some of, just to zero in on this, your technique and your many, many years of work and studying and going through textbooks and throwing them away, and then what are some of the eureka moments that when you've got to the true technique of singing? Well,
I can tell you one that I call a eureka, really, truly a eureka moment. I was working on myself because I've always worked on myself because I am a real singer, and I was dissatisfied because I knew I wasn't on target, and I knew that instinctively I would know when I got on target, and I was researching my voice, using my voice, and I was screaming in the studio, in tears, because I could not understand how the breath worked. And I lost my mind, and I was going, I'll never get it. I'll never get this. I can't stop this. God help me. And I got it in that one. I got it. Oh my God, eureka. I understand it. From that moment on, it was like it opened a complete new vision toward the rest of the research.
But got what? Explain what you got.
What I got was The breath that I took when I thought, that was it.
What happens?
The tone that came after the release of the air, my body automatically, technically, the diaphragm lowered 1 second. I mean, that 1 centimeter. And with that 1 centimeter, my body sucked in the air necessary to keep everything going. And that's all it takes. It's like a little tiny pump. Before that, I was always taking too much air, like purposely taking it. You don't take air. The diaphragm takes it for you if you allow it to and let it alone. And one of the main problems with the way that we sing for the last 50 years or so is taking breath. You'll see, you watch the start of anybody who sings, and they'll go, well, if you do that right now, you yourself, tell me which organ closes down. If you go,
and then hold your breath.
You close your throat.
The throat, yeah.
Yeah. So how can you sing if you close your throat? You sing under pressure then. You believe it.
Obvious.
It's that easy. It's that simple. But sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to get to.
Yeah. It seems it's ridiculous almost how easy it is, except that it wasn't ridiculous to discover this because we were also trained in this world of singing, and we were taught to prepare the breath and expand the rib cage and open and lift and all of the rest of it that you're taught.
I love Pavarotti. He's the only one that was decent in the last 30, 40 years, whatever. But he too was he never took a lot, but he took more than he needed to start. He took more than he needed. Not enough to close everything, but it was just a little bit more to protect.
You said in the old textbooks that there was that you need a thimble full of air, and you didn't know what that meant.
I searched for the first 38 years of my life. I searched for that thimbleful, but nobody could tell me where it was.
No, everybody has a different opinion. They all agree in their haphazardness in some way, but they all have different opinions about how you're supposed to breathe, and the contradictory information you get when you go from one teacher to the next is just astonishing.
And these are major teachers. I had one of the best talents ever, and I went to the best people. They always took me in. And I knew what my nature was, and I just couldn't get to it. Until I just kept studying for years. And studying was helping me understand a lingo of, I get closer and closer to the really old schools because I thought, what we're doing is not right. Where all these people are doing is not right anymore. It's not right. It's all wrong universally.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about Western singing.
Right.
And I went to the best, and I didn't get the answers.
But so that was definitely a eureka moment, understanding exactly how simply the breath works practically. Well, basically that the body does it for you, which of course
we're all doing it now, like you say. We're taking little breaths.
Yeah,
I mean, you're doing it right now. We're doing it right now. People who sing horribly but are not singing and talking will be doing it.
Yeah. But
yet when they applied it to, the only difference between singing and speaking is continuity. But the breath doesn't change. It's just that the breath is, let's say if you have a written score and you have to do 12 words on a musical line in legato, then you know where you can breathe. Every time you stop is a breath. So you don't ever have to force your breath in any way.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because what we learn in a lot of music schools is that having a really long breath, in other words, being able to hold a note for a really long time or sing an incredibly long line on one breath, is some kind of great merit, as if that was important. It isn't, of course. It doesn't matter. Everybody has a different set of lungs. Everybody needs to take breath when they need to take breath. And if you breathe properly, like when we do when we talk, there's never a question of interrupting the musical line to stop it and take in a big breath like this in order to then, prepare the next breath. nobody ever talked about this in the past. The old timers would say, I breathe where it's comfortable. Whenever I need to breathe, I breathe it. You don't even notice it. In fact, one old singer, whose name was Lina Pagliugi, she was very well known for her beautiful legato singing, said to a friend of ours who went to study with her and asked her about breathing. She said, well, what do you mean about breathing? And the student said, our friend said, well, tell me about how should I breathe? And she said, well, you can breathe with your nose or your mouth. Either one is fine. That was her answer. And there was never a question about how to prepare your breath or expand your breath or enhance it. That came along later. And then I learned in music school, I remember that, oh, no, you can't breathe here. You must mark your breaths. And then the pianist has to learn where you're going to breathe and stop the music in order to find you. It's very complicated.
Music has to be spontaneous.
Yeah.
Well, the spontaneity goes out the window when you start, blocking yourself from where you have to breathe.
Yeah, and then singers start pumping the breath, and then they get insecure, and so then they have to take special lessons how to expand their lungs, and it becomes always further and further away from nature. And singing is natural. It's nature. It's one of the most human things we can do, and we're turning into something that is artificial, and it isn't.
Well, the one thing that they do today is they sing with lungs full of air, and the voice can't handle that.
No, and the lungs can't either. They can't stand it.
And because my father was a coal miner, and I used to, he was not an educated man. He was a brilliant guy. He could do anything, fix anything, make anything, because he learned how to be a tool and die maker later and went into that field. But he was backward. He never really spoke English that well, although he was born in America, but his family only spoke their dialect. And all of the children that were born in the United States, they only spoke in that dialect to each other, too. So he's very insecure in English. So I used to go with him to the doctor, to the lung doctor, because coal miners had to get the lungs checked. And the doctor, I noticed, would always say, exhale, exhale, exhale. And he was supposed to measure the lung capacity. Mm-hmm. And I found that very peculiar. You think somebody was examining you for lung capacity, they would say, inhale, inhale, like,
let's
there's
see
your
how
lung
much
capacity.
Thank you.
And this influenced me as a, researcher, let's say, in singing, and as a singer too. So he would go, and that's where the needle went. See, I didn't have to take breath to say that, because you have to get your minimum reserve, like any sports person does too. You don't function. If your lungs are too full of air, you can't function in anything. So you have to release it, and how you know you're getting there is because the sound finishes. You could do it fast. That's where you can start. That's where tone starts. That's where any movement starts.
So we're really singing with the air inside our head, would you say?
No, you're singing with the minimum air possible.
Yeah.
Your minimum air.
But can you still get volume then?
Pardon me?
Yes, because you don't need more air for volume. Yes.
No, volume has nothing to do with air.
Yes. That's right.
That comes from the size of the mouth.
The cavity.
Yeah.
The cavity. The mouth is like a cavern.
Mm. So, it's an amplifier, basically.
But your volume is not in your tone. You can yell really loud, but if you close your mouth, your yell will be about like. That's about it. And tone has no volume. It's a really super minimum, and it stays there. You can't increment your tone without.
Because you said tone goes up and down, and then the words
go
horizontal.
Yeah. It's only two-dimensional, so how could it project? Nothing two-dimensional projects.
Right. There is that thing, isn't there, about people being told to focus their tone.
Yeah. You can't focus the tone either, because tone is vibrated air. You can't focus vibrated air.
Right.
And tone comes through the nose then?
Oh, if the mouth is closed, sure. It always does anyway. Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Mm.
Yeah.
Or the palate.
Yeah, the air that we use for singing or speech, for that matter,
Yeah.
actually passes through the head, through the sinus, and through the nose. And what we do is we articulate that vibrated air with the mouth,
Nothing comes out of the mouth at all.
except for resonance. I mean,
And it
yeah.
can't, and they know that now, what I told you about the MRIs. Every time you go to say something, the back of the throat, the back of the mouth, not the throat. The throat is here, and that's always open.
Mhm.
But the back of the mouth closes. So if you want to, like when we're children, we exhale on a cold substance like glass
Mhm.
or a mirror or something. We go, that's coming from the back of the mouth. But if you phonate, if you go, you feel a back of the mouth close, because the air is air that's in the cavity of the mouth that's going this way.
Mhm.
It's not coming up. The air from the body is coming out of the nose, never out of the mouth, unless you purposely go like that.
Mhm.
There's no phonate.
So what does the larynx do then?
The larynx makes the pitch.
Makes the pitch. Okay.
The real mouth of the singer is not here. There's nothing in the mouth at all. It's just a resonance chamber that has air in it because it's a hole.
But the
When your mouth is closed, there's no air in it.
Yeah, you said those smokers always put that device on their
you mean when
larynx.
they've had the
Cancer.
larynx removed?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
would be where this hole is here, this fosso here. That's where they put the mic, and that's where the tone. That's where the words really are come from. They're formed up here, but not in the mouth. It's just forming a ball of resonance. But it's right here. That's the real mouth. It's right here.
It's not the larynx itself that makes the pitches. The vocal cords make the pitches, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that wasn't very clear. The larynx
And so
is
then, so then they get problems because why do they need surgery on? Why does it go wrong here?
You mean in
in this
vocal
part?
cords? Singers.
The vocal cords are inside of this Adam's apple area. It's inside.
Right.
You mean why do singers need surgery on their vocal cords sometimes?
Yeah, or the larynx, or
Oh well, okay. Sometimes a larynx has to be removed for disease. Generally, singers don't have that problem. That's illness, but singers get lesions on their vocal cords from, or actors do too, from abuse.
Abuse between the air and the tone, basically.
Yeah.
So they're pushing on the tone too hard, and because it has to be buoyant. When they lose the buoyancy of the speech, because speech is on the air column, then you have problems. You have rubbing.
Mm-hmm.
You have attacks that are very hard.
Yeah, you basically form calluses on your vocal cords.
Yeah, that's
normally.
right.
Oh, right. That's a good way to describe it.
And if a lesion in, let's say, in terms of voice membrane, I mean, we're talking about something very fine and very delicate. Vocal cords are very small. A lesion is any kind of small injury. So people that say, they prefer to say they have a polyp rather than a nodule because they feel that this is, it doesn't show that they have a bad technique. Nodes in the singing world, are sort of a sign. They used to be anyway. One time we're supposed to be ashamed of it. Now people don't even feel shame for anything. So why would they feel ashamed for that? But so some singers like to say that they have polyps rather than nodes. But actually, any time you get a vocal lesion, when you bring the vocal cords together too hard, or you take too much air and then force it through the cords, or anything else, you're basically creating a little bit of a cut or a scrape on the cord, so it'll bleed slightly. When that happens, or when there's any kind of little injury, cells rush in to form a barrier. They create they try to heal it, and there you start forming a little growth. When that growth gets big enough, it starts to get in the way of the vibrations. It's, if you can imagine a pebble in a brook, the vibrations have to go around this object. And so what singers do, or what speakers do, is sometimes they live with those nodules, and they either use them to create their special strange voices. Some people like that, not opera singers, but other maybe pop singers or actors. Some of them work their whole lives with notes. But if you want any fine tuning, if you want real precise sensitivity with your voice, you can't have an object in your throat.
Well, look what Dustin Hoffman did for that one film, The 100-Year-Old Man, or whatever.
Oh, mean when he did Little Big Man? Have you ever seen that film? It's an old film from the 70s, I think.
He locked himself somewhere for days or a week or something, and kept on screaming until he lost
made himself
his voice.
Hoarse.
He made himself hoarse to do that film.
Yeah, because he was supposed to play in part of the film. I think I'm saying this right, a 123-year-old man. So he, in his mind, a very old person would have also a very ruined voice, although not necessarily true, but he wanted to do it that way. So, it's like people going to a football game and screaming all day and they come out hoarse, Well, singers do that too.
That would have been more fun. Why didn't he do that? Instead of going in a room.
I mean, some people would rather just act than do something that serious to their throats. I would not do that.
Yeah.
By the way, Jack, I think I told you this. The only organ in our bodies that never ages is the vocal cords.
Vocal cords, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Marianna told me a wonderful story about an actor that you worked with, Lisa, who had surgery.
Oh, yeah.
Removed one.
Oh my goodness, that was quite an event. Yeah, Giancarlo Salvucci.
She worked with him every day for 8 months.
He was a wonderful guy, very talented actor who had abused his voice terribly. He'd smoked everything and had also he'd also done a lot of, because he was a very big man, they would give him roles where he would be some kind of emperor or king or something, and he'd always be shouting and yelling, and he didn't know how to do it. But he did get cancer in a vocal cord. When he first came to us, he had the cancer. He wasn't 100% sure that he had it, but he'd had one biopsy that was doubtful. They wanted to send him for another one because they weren't positive. And we met him through another student of mine, and another actress who come to work out her nodules with me. She's fine. And she thought maybe he had nodes. But when we heard his voice, I remember saying, do get that biopsy. It doesn't sound healthy at all. And when he returned to us, he said, I have to have my vocal cord removed. At first, they were going to do radiation therapy on him because knowing he was an actor, they thought maybe they could kill the cancer in the cord without removing it. But he actually opted for the surgery, which was a healthier choice in the end. They did remove completely one vocal cord, leaving the other one intact. And of course, then he had no voice. He had to stay completely silent for 1 month. And when he went for his first session of vocal therapy in the hospital, he asked his doctor if we could be there. So we went, and they very kindly let us in the room. They didn't have to, but that was nice of them. And we watched as this vocal therapist put him through some first steps. And the first thing she did really scared us because she told him to take a huge breath and then push all the air out through his throat, which of course was now still raw.
The result was sort of like burping a tone.
Well, to me, it sounded like this sort of hideous growl, sort of like, like that, to try to get any vibration going in the remaining vocal cord. And she said to us, well, it's all over. He has no voice now. All we can do is try to get him to make any kind of sound. His career is finished and the whole thing. And of course, she was working with a doctor. We're not physicians. And we said, well, all right, but we thought it was rather horrifying. And he started doing some of that therapy, but he kept checking in with us. And after, I guess it was about 2 or 3 weeks of that work with this therapist, he came to see us with a photograph of his, they did some stroboscopic photos of his vocal cords, of his one cord, and there was a growth on it. And I said, well, what does your doctor say about that? It was a granuloma. And he said, oh, well, the doctor said that might be okay. Maybe it'll actually give me something to make the voice vibrate with. At this point, of course, he had only air coming through his voice, no sound. And he went to see another very famous voice specialist who said, oh, no problem. We can just operate and remove that. Go back and have more therapy. That's what you can do. And anyway, your career is over, so what do you care? Which was a terrible thing to say to a professional actor who's ready to throw himself under a train. he decided at that point to come back and quit the voice therapy. And he said he wanted to work with me. So I had to invent a way to work with him because it's not our field. But instinctively, we know that what Marianna said before, regular vibration heals. And I figured that by allowing him to listen to me, I would get very close to his ear and hum quiet pitches into the side of the body that had the vocal cord intact, and that would start to vibrate sympathetically with hearing my voice. And I massaged the other side of the throat at the same time. And little by little, he started making very quiet sounds. It sounded like a very quiet violin, like that.
That was beginning.
And he started to feel it. And before long, we acquired about 10 tones in his voice. Fortunately, he was musical, so he was able to actually sing a scale of about 10 notes. And usually what happens with men when they lose a vocal cord, from what I understand, I'm not sure if this is absolutely true, but I was told this by a couple of doctors, men never end up having the beautiful chest quality anymore. They sort of talk like this. This is the sound they make, because they never couldn't quite get the tone again. Well, in the beginning, he was speaking very quietly, but he already was sounding like a baritone. And when he had finished a month of this work with me, or so, maybe 2 months, he went back to see the doctor, and the doctor said the granuloma was gone. It had dried up and fallen off, and we were very happy about that. We did a couple more months, and then Marianna and I, at the end of the work, Marianna and I went back with him to see the physician this time, the surgeon that had operated on him. And there were so many people in the room because they were all very interested in this, because by this time, Giancarlo could talk. And so there were like 3 voice therapists in the room and about 4 doctors, and we were there, and his wife was there. And they put I don't know how to say sonda in English, down the throat, the little optic fiber thing to look through on the throat. And he sang these tones while everybody looked at a screen. It was projected onto a screen. And to our amazement, because of course we hadn't seen this, I only knew it was happening by the touch of my hand and by listening. What we saw was the side of the throat that had lost the vocal cord coming in to meet the vibrating vocal cord and vibrating in perfect harmony. And everybody stood there, sort of their gaping mouths and staring at this thing. And the surgeon said, if I had not been the one to remove that vocal cord, I know I'd cut it out of there, I would think he had 2 cords. And to me, the most important, the most valuable lesson of this for me was that the body really does want to heal. It'll do anything it can. If you give it the right stimulus, it will heal. Without Giancarlo's complete collaboration, I couldn't have done that on my own. There's no way. It's not like a magic pill. You have to have the person working. He worked very hard on it. For months, he made no sound out of the studio. He would only come. A lot of
patience.
Yeah, he came, 5 days a week, and we made sounds here, and he went home, and he never spoke. At a certain point, though, he was doing so well, he acquired almost all of his baritone voice on the bottom. And then I got him to sing Verdi arias in the proper keys. He'd never sung before.
Well, there you need your full range.
And he had it.
He got the full range, yeah.
He was thrilled. He was. Everybody around him was thrilled. It was incredible. He got his entire voice back, and everybody that had known him before the surgery said that he sounded fantastic. And he said one day he returned to acting a little bit, and the only thing he didn't do, talking about volume, was speak very loudly. He didn't want to. We hadn't worked on yelling because it's delicate work. But he could be heard perfectly from the stage, acoustical stage.
He sang?
He sang, and he gave a little class. He was a very fine acting teacher. His students loved him. And he gave a course, and there was a woman there who took this class that day who happened to be a voice therapist. He found that out, so he went over to her and he said, how do you find my voice? What do you think about it as a voice therapist? And she said, well, it's really beautiful. It's a nice resonant baritone voice. And he said, well, he had her say a few more things. He got her talking a little bit. He wanted to know what she had to say about his voice. And she said, "Oh, it's great. I notice you don't speak terribly loudly, but it's perfectly clear and everything you say is audible. It's really nice voice, beautiful work." And he said, "I want to tell you a little secret. I only have one vocal cord." And she said, "Non è possibile." She said, "We learned in medical school that no man can ever sound like that after a cord is removed." And to me, I mean, the doctor in the hospital even asked us if we would be willing to then do rounds with him and visit patients that had lost vocal cords. At first, we said yes.
I didn't want to.
Although it's devastating work, it is, And although I was perfectly willing to talk to people about how to do this, you have to listen. You have to have an ear. The main thing about working with the singer is listening very intently. You have to know what you're listening to. Rather than trying to get a sound out of the singer, you have to know what they have in them. That's the opposite of the way people work on voice now. And for him, he had to learn to listen very intensely to his own voice, to my sounds. And I had to listen to his vocal cord and how it vibrated.
It's listening and feeling, becoming sensitive.
Sense of touch, yeah. But it's very interesting.
Sense of touch and sense of hearing.
Yeah. But interestingly, even though this doctor was flabbergasted and everybody in the hospital in Fano, I guess it was. No, Fermo. They were all astonished. There was no follow-up. Kind of typical. No follow-up. Yeah. He said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. It's a miracle, blah, blah." But then, of course, nothing happened. Unfortunately, Giancarlo didn't live too long. He had also a very, very bad heart. He didn't die of cancer. I'm happy to say he died in his sleep. And his daughter said he died very happy because he'd had a beautiful session with his voice and he was singing. But his heart stopped in his sleep. He'd had a lot of problems with it. And we're very sad. We were talking. I mean, it was part planning and part joking, but it was true. We wanted to create a show for him called "How I Lost a Vocal Cord and Found My Voice," which he loved the idea of.
He told me one day how he went to a hardware store.
Oh, that's funny.
This is when Lisa told him not to talk at all.
That's very funny.
So he goes in to the hardware store and he says to the guy.
He handed him a note.
He handed him a note.
Yeah.
And he said he had no voice.
Right.
But he wanted a screw.
He handed him a note that said 4 screws.
Yeah.
Or quattro vite. 4 screws. And he handed it to him. He said, "I can't talk," and handed him a note. So the guy looked at the note. Okay. And then he looked up at Giancarlo, since it's so funny how people do this. Giancarlo couldn't talk. This man had nothing wrong with his own voice, of course. But he looked at Giancarlo, and instead of saying, "All right, you'd like, okay, it's written here 4 screws," he mimed to him, "So you want 4 screws?" As if he also couldn't hear.
Yeah.
It was very funny. People are amazing when it comes to they don't know how to act.
Oh, some of the stories.
Anyway, it was an incredible adventure working on a voice like that. And we've done a lot of work with people.
Took a long time, 8 months, every day.
Yeah, we've had a lot of
Almost
serious
every day.
cases. Also, we had an actor who came a number of years ago who had herniated vocal cords.
You know what that is? Vocal cords are together like that. This was that.
One was
that's a hernia.
He'd been
Crossover.
playing a lot of character roles and screaming for a number of years, and his voice was a mess. We've had singers with nodes, singers with burning throats, edema, I guess you say in English, a common problem with throats.
Swelling in the vocal cords.
All of that is completely resolvable. There's no problem. But the person who has whatever problem, usually they get themselves into trouble, and then it takes a certain kind of person to say, "All right, I'll stop and I'll do what you say." Most of them, the answer when you say to them, "Look, you need some rest," and then you have to learn not to yell anymore, and their answer is, "Well, how am I going to do that? I couldn't possibly do that." Well, that's how you got into the situation to begin with.
I had one woman that came to me who had cancer and had her tongue removed.
Oh, wow.
And
palate. You mean that poor one that came?
Yeah. I think she probably died because I found a way of, I said, "Could you do like that?" And she could do that. So I thought, okay, so I could get her to do like C's and G's, a palatal thing. And I was working on a plan for her, just from a little test I gave her to see what I could get out of the, like, she could do that. So I knew that she could have lip contact and palate contact.
Mm.
And those are the furthest dynamics of the language in the head, looking at the head. If you look at a side view, if you can go from here to your palate, which would be here, the speech is all in between those two things. So I thought, well, maybe I could get her to do something. And I gave her a very successful lesson I started. But then I think she probably died.
She needed more.
She was so elated, but
she was very happy, yeah.
She didn't come back. I have a feeling that she got worse in the cancer.
Those are the cases that we'd rather not take, simply because, our specialty is really singing. Not that, we feel for people like this, and, there's a lot of therapy to be done if we wanted to do it, but our love is working with singers who are desperate to get their voices in shape. We know what that feels like. We've been through it ourselves, and we sympathize and understand and love them, and we want to help, And the more difficult the case, the more interesting it is, actually,
Yeah, I bet it.
Sometimes it's really much more simple than you think. And now after years and years of work, Marianna says that she can fix a voice very quickly, and it's true. She really can, as long as the singer collaborates and doesn't rebel.
I now, at 76 years old, I'm at my true peak.
The apex
my
of your
peak, I can't tell you. It's like spot on.
Yeah, it's easy. It is easy, actually.
It's so easy for me, I can't tell you that. I don't even have to think about it.
Jack, what the hardest thing about all of it is not knowing how to do it. We want to train people to do this work. We really do want to train people to do this.
We're willing to give it away.
Oh, no, we
no cost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But they have to give in. The hardest part about that is training the ear. Training the eye is hard too, but training the ear is worse. You can learn to look at a singer and see tension and see where things are going wrong, but you have to hear it. If you can't hear it, you can't do it. But the hardest part about working with singers is their own insecurities and the fact that they want to sound a certain way. And it's hard for some of them to relinquish that. They just can't believe it. I think a lot of the times singers can't believe that their voices are beautiful enough the way they are without making them sound like something.
Well, again, let me just interrupt 1 second. It's finding yourself.
Yeah, again,
it's going toward yourself, the whole thing, because all of our work is based on not giving you anything at all.
Yeah.
It's removing what's in the way.
That's right, taking away.
Between you and your voice.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
And that's a question of hearing and seeing,
I suppose that's one of the major ways we're different. Once a person that I met, he was a university professor, but he wasn't a musical person. He asked me, just sort of point blank, tell me 3 ways, 3 different ways that your work is different. And it really caught me off guard, and I didn't know what to say, at the moment. But actually, that would be one of the major things right there, is that we don't add, we take away.
We don't use it. We don't have a technique, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, we have a technique on
We
our
have a
side.
technique in training with our ears.
Yeah, we have a method for working, but the singer doesn't learn a method.
No, there's no method.
Yeah. Balance is balance. You can't call that a method.
A method doesn't exist.
Yeah. There is no technique in the end.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because if you want to learn from a great painter, you'd go and you try and learn his style,
right,
or some other martial art technique or any discipline. But what you're saying is, I heard you say that it's like Michelangelo. You take away everything that's not
exactly.
there.
Oh, there you go. That's it. Yeah.
In the end, a great artist, you go through the entire process, and it takes a lot of discipline and suffering, sometimes sweating and all the rest of it, to learn certainly how to technically handle your instrument. You are walking. Well, I think Marianna's told you this, that many of the great singers of the past said that singing, the closest thing to singing in terms of athletics is walking a tightrope.
Right.
And one great singer from the past named Aretha Franklins, who was a very fine soprano, she said it's not just walking a tightrope; it's actually walking on a fine steel wire, and it's greasy. I add that part. So you really have to keep your balance. And in order to learn that, there's a lot of discipline involved. You can't be asleep and you can't be tense. You have to learn how to hold your balance, But once you've learned that, it becomes part of you. Then there's no longer a question of technique anymore. You're not, it has to disappear.
You could say that technique doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And by the way, style and technique are two different things.
Completely.
Style is it's not what you're doing, but it's how you're delivering whatever you're doing.
Right. Yeah. The great instrumentalists, I grew up in an instrumental household, right? Father violinist and mother pianist. The greater the musician, the more amalgamated with their instrument they become. So you could say about an incredible pianist like Benedetti Michelangeli or Horowitz that they become the piano. They really do. They're no longer separate. And that's difficult because you're dealing with a humongous instrument that's full of metal and wood and they nevertheless become the instrument. And we don't have to worry about that. We are our instrument. And why do we make it so hard?
We were perfect as babies. Nobody taught us anything. Yeah. We could do absolutely everything. Then we go off for one reason or another reason. We go to bad teachers for one, and then you get screwed up.
Yeah, you get layers of advice.
And layers of living. You might be unhappy because you're not able to do this or that, and you're singing or whatever.
Yeah. And then you try.
And then you're trying too hard, and then it gets very complicated. I was just thinking, speaking of instrumentalists, your father was a violinist, a wonderful violinist.
Uh-huh.
And after Bill died, Lisa had a beautiful violin to sell.
Yeah, because I'm not a violinist. So
at one point, she found a person who was really super interested in this beautiful instrument. And she was shocked because when this person started on one pitch on the violin, she heard her father's tone.
He did too.
And the guy did too. He said, "Oh, that's not my tone. It was her father's tone."
He said, "This is your dad. This is your dad."
It becomes so much with the violinist and the instrument. They're one. Then they become one after years and years.
Well, it's a living instrument. It's wood, And if somebody plays on it for 45 years, 8 hours a day or something like that, it starts to take on the shape, the feeling of the person. And that's interesting.
Everybody has their own arm pressure and their, approach.
Yeah.
And that permeates the wood. It's wood. Wood vibrates.
I don't know.
That's
English
amazing.
half the time. terribly messed up English by now. The one thing I did want to say about singing that I think is phenomenal, if you do remove everything that gets in the way and you get down to the essence of the voice and the singer gets to know herself or himself, becomes herself, then the next step is abandoning yourself to your voice to the point where you actually, whereas the instrumentalist becomes the instrument, the singer becomes the song. Right? So that there's actually no difference between, whereas the instrumentalist becomes the instrument. I mean, great instrumentalists are like that. You could barely take the violin out of the hands of a great violinist. They're part of them,
Yeah.
Well, the singer has to become the song because there's really no barrier between you and the song, whereas singers tend to have all these obstacles in their way, and they're always figuring out ways to maneuver this phrase or that phrase. And how do I get to that note? Well, if I say that vowel on that note, I can't do it. I have to change the shape of the vowel. And going through all this nonsense all the time. Prepare, take a breath before that pitch. Who knows if I'm going to hit it this time? You can actually see the relief on the faces of some singers because they know that they finally finished that one phrase that they were terrified of. They go through all of this. And all of that just has to go in the past. It has to be removed.
Remember that guy in Vienna? He was a tenor. Bonisoli was his name.
Oh my goodness!
Bonisoli,
I forgot about him.
Italian tenor.
Of course, he was famous.
And he was afraid of his high notes. And whenever he would get it, he almost did
he would jump in the air and go goal,
goal
on stage
like a soccer player.
Oh, it was very funny. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he
Oh, he was quite a character.
He was a
You could
character.
see him in the main street in Vienna.
He was sort of like Elvis Presley.
Yeah,
from
he had
Disney.
like a pompadour type hairdo, and he would wear like celeste, blue, light robin egg blue clothes.
with fringes on them.
with
and
fringes and things.
jewelry. He was incredible. He was incredible. Yeah, okay.
The
well,
Elvis Presley of the opera stage.
Yeah. But thinking
Elvis sang well, by the
thinking
way.
about a singer that can't hit their high notes. Well, I mean, he could hit them. He just was afraid.
He was afraid.
But I mean, getting back to what I was saying about that is that that's nonsense. You're doing music. You can't be there thinking about your voice. You're supposed to be musical. That's the main problem with going to the opera. It's not musical.
But I just mentioned Elvis Presley, terrific. Frank Sinatra.
He was great. Yeah.
No problems.
Mm-hmm.
You name it. There's so many of them are really wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah. To go to the opera world, we have to go back a little further, I guess.
And Adele would have been perfect if she didn't imitate, because what she did was she charged her. It's like a little extra charge into her music, just a little extra charge that she did at the expense of her vocal cords.
Yeah.
She could have gotten the same effect, but not with that little extra
Well, I would say
push.
I'd have to say it was a lot extra to me because she's very young, and her voice really suffered.
No, I would never say it was a lot.
But would she have been so successful? Could she have still sounded amazing?
She's a
with her
beautiful
own
voice. Yeah,
You know what?
Absolutely.
You could remove. This happened to a boy who was on a motorcycle, had an accident.
Oh, not that. I see.
No, I just want to say that he lost his larynx.
Yeah.
And they had to put another implant in, and he was worried. I mean, how is he going to sound? It was identical to his other one because the chords are really just two little bands of, what are they? They're little stretchy bands of folds.
Ligaments.
Yeah. It's the body that has the tone. The body has a tone, and her body she's built for singing. She's a real singer.
I think
so. She would have she has a magnificent voice.
Mm-hmm.
And if she just took a little bit, it's like overcharging the gas pedal on an engine, just running a little too hard. You back off of that, you get more buck for your money, right? More whatever.
Yeah. Let's say more bang for more. Wait, it's an American expression. More bang for your buck. There you go.
That's right.
Yeah, very old expression. Oh my goodness, that's really.
Where
old.
did that come from?
I don't know.
This area here, maybe. I don't know.
But the question that you had, actually, that's an interesting one because, and it sort of ties in with what Marianna said before about the difference between technique and style. The problems that a lot of singers have is that they get mixed up between their sound and the style of the music. So they think they have to sound a certain way in order to sing that style, but in reality, and then they change their approach to their instruments.
That's a really important thing because you've talked about that twice during this little interview.
Yeah, that's important to talk about.
And you confuse style with technique.
If you think about it logically, and you take, say, take Oscar Peterson. Okay, he's a very fine jazz pianist. Well, he's also a classical pianist. He's classically trained, and he could play beautiful Bach, Beethoven. But when he played jazz, he played jazz. He didn't change pianos or techniques. He played exactly the same way. Same thing would be true with anyone who was a crossover musician of any kind. Well, not singers today, but anyone. My mother was the same way, by the way. She was a jazz pianist. She began that way as an infant because she was a child prodigy, and then learned classical piano, became a classical pianist, but was always a jazz pianist too. And she played with the same hands, the same approach to the instrument. You get a different tone because of your style. Style is a choice. Not everybody can sing every style. I don't have that talent that my mother did to play
that
jazz piano.
That depends on your temperament, too.
Yeah, it does. It does. But that's a completely different subject. You don't have to change techniques. And this is the nonsense that they're broadcasting everywhere now, working on all kinds of different ways to get that sound. And they're ruining themselves. They really are.
By the way, temperament is a really important thing in any art form. For instance, there are people who prefer cartoons to paintings.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
That's temperament. That's okay.
Yeah.
There's some great cartoonists.
Yeah, sure.
And that's all right. It's just that the way they relate to life in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there really is no such thing as a voice technique for jazz or a voice technique for pop. And by the way, it really isn't even fair to say to a singer that they have a really good voice for Baroque music or a really good voice for, I don't know, blues. That's not the point.
It's the temperament.
You can have a good voice for any music you want to sing. It's your temperament and your interpretation. That's all that matters. First, you have to be yourself, and then you go from there. And you sing Mississippi Delta blues, or you sing jazz, or you sing musicals. It doesn't matter. But if you don't know your instrument, you'll never be able to do it properly. And what ends up happening then is people get stuck in a style, and they can't get out of it. So that they can't even sing like "Happy Birthday to You" without going into that vocal position that they've trained their voices to be in, and that is a trap. It's a terrible feeling,
But in the end, it's all posture. Posture. It's
yeah.
If you look at a child has a perfect posture until they get beaten down in some way or other by school, parents, experiences,
Right.
And I used to sit around and keep watching people. I watched them because this was helping me to try and understand physiology and stuff like that, and posture when it meant, even before I knew how postural singing was. What the difference between a child singing and an adult singing, apart from the experience of life. The child has a perfect, before they're touched, let's say, with teachers or whatever, they do it perfectly fine.
Yeah.
A singer like me who did it perfectly fine, then through very difficult periods and bad teaching and everything, bad teachers, I lost my posture. I have regained my posture at my age now. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm now like I should have been without all of the terrifying problems in between. The whole.
Is that just through awareness?
Pardon me?
Is that just through awareness, being in
Through
the body?
awareness, yeah.
Well,
Awareness
I work on myself through the ear, and I kept urging myself little by little by little. When I couldn't do it even with sound, I did it in silence, because if you do things in silence, if you think in silence about a movement, your body is actually doing it in silence.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it physically. You work so deeply in the mind that it starts to move things. Well, you say the mind can move mountains or whatever. It can.
It really does.
Yeah, you had me sing some. Just sing some songs in my head in the practice, in the lessons, and I could feel these subtle movements on my palate.
Yeah, that's right.
You can feel it in your entire body. Actually, you can feel your body respond.
Yeah.
If you think a song, or if you just whisper the words but think the melody, you can actually feel your body as if you were singing.
You could do that with whatever. If you have to give a speech somewhere, think of it in your head. How you want to start, what you want to say, the feelings and everything.
Yeah.
And you'll do it.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
It's that simple in a way, but then we invent ways to work with it. And like I said, our work is taking away, not adding, because if you add anything, it's going to take you away from that.
Yeah, that's true. I remember noticing when I first came to Italy, and Marianna was here before I was, of course, that if you were
I've lived in Italy most of my life.
If you were in an opera house and backstage, or say, sorry, I have some allergies. I think we have the heat on. It always bothers me. You wouldn't hear backstage in an opera house years ago, or like going to an audition, you wouldn't hear people vocalizing. You know what vocalizing means, right?
Oh, that's a big
exercising
thing.
their voices.
That's important to
You'd
say.
hear maybe a little bit of a la sort of thing, and that would be it. And over the years, that's when I was extremely young, and over the years, you started to hear more and more and more vocalizing. And now, right this minute, I can't tell you anything, but the last time we were in the backstage of an opera house when we went to give a lecture in an opera house, singers were rehearsing, and they were really hammering at their voices. And then what starts to happen is their voices want to go back to nature. Everything in the body does. I learned that from working with Giancarlo too. The man who lost his vocal cord. His voice was trying to return to nature somehow. The voice, when you put it into a position, any artificial position, it doesn't matter if it's opera or pop, it makes no difference. It's still artificial. Your voice will try to go back to what it was, neutral, relaxed. These singers can't allow that because they're making a sound. So they have to hammer away at the instrument and keep vocalizing. And now we hear singers that vocalize between acts. It's not enough to just warm up, so to speak, a little bit before going on stage the first time.
To maintain a creative position.
Yeah.
That's what they do. All the schools do that now.
Yeah. There used to be a thing that the old timers used to say that was called leaving your voice in the dressing room if you kept rehearsing, right? And in fact, if you look at it from the way we're talking about it, where you take away everything that isn't you, well, the only thing that you really need to warm up then is yourself. You need to be awake. You need to be, alert and ready, but you don't need to vocalize for an hour before going to sing. And I have to say, I was reading some people talking about their routines that they do to vocalize, and it's just astonishing. I do 10 minutes of that, 40 minutes of this, then I do Pilates, then I do Feldenkrais, then I go back and I do another half an hour of humming, and I just do high notes. They do all this crazy stuff to warm up. What's left?
Even the concept of warm up is not right.
Yeah, because you're not going to run a race or rock climb or play rugby. It's not that. That's not singing.
Do you warm up to talk in the morning when you get up? Maybe you have a little croaking, you take a little coffee or something, and it goes away. Yeah. You don't warm up your speech.
Yeah. But it's all part of the same.
We're off the deep end.
It's all part of the off the deep end.
So it didn't go wrong with Wagner. You said that in the article, but then when did the technique start to go wrong?
The reason that we talked about these three composers, can I just explain this a little bit?
Yeah,
This is a complicated subject. We brought up the Wagner, Verdi, and Puccini because of the periods in which they had been writing, and because they were major composers, and because they also challenged the singers in new ways.
They knew what singing was, definitely.
They challenged them because Verdi started to write music that was quite emotional, and Puccini took it even further with his style of verismo, where he had the average guy as a character on stage.
Yeah, up until then, there were kings and queens and
goddesses and
historical figures.
And already Verdi had changed that. A lot of people say that La Traviata was the first verismo opera in a certain sense because it was about real people, just average people, in a particularly sort of gritty situation of a woman who is a professional prostitute or a courtesan who falls in love with a man. And, so it's a sort of a real story, it's no longer about sort of mythical creatures. And it's very emotional. And Verdi, like Wagner, they wrote their operas based on the singing that they heard. Beautiful, wonderful, balanced singing. People often don't know about Wagner having admired beautiful legato singing with clear, even words, which is what he said he liked. But he actually created a style of singing for actors. He wanted to hear beautiful speech. He wanted his singers to be fine actors, but he also wanted them to be excellent singers. And they meaning he and Verdi, depended on the singing they heard. They just assumed that's how you sang.
They were different styles.
Different styles, different languages.
But not technique. The singer's responsible for his own technique.
There was one way of singing, that way. That was the only way they expected people would sing. Unfortunately, what started happening was the first people to debut these new operas, which were received with great enthusiasm, of course, and a lot of controversy, and then going on to Puccini, even more so. The first people to debut these operas were people that had come from that great background of beautiful singing that some people refer to as bel canto, which is, we don't have to go into that. There are various ways of talking about it. But anyway, the beautiful, balanced singing, long-lasting, healthy singing. They came from that background. They probably did an absolutely beautiful job. But by the time they were a little bit older, their teachers, the people they had learned to sing from, their teachers had died out, died of old age. The new generation, the people that debuted these pieces, had learned beautiful singing from the past. And they took for granted, we know this because we actually had some experience with some very, very old singers that we met. They took for granted that you would know how to do that because that was the only way to sing. Nobody would have sung any other way. That didn't exist. So when they started to teach, because of course they did, they retired and turned around and started teaching. They were teaching interpretation and style. Here we go. See, style. They were teaching style, the new styles, the Verdi style, the Wagner style, the Puccini style, assuming that you knew how to handle your voice just fine. The problem was that they were teaching all of the emotional side of it, but they didn't know how to balance the voices of their students. And we learned this, first of all, from studying with Maria Carbone, who was born at the beginning of the 1900s. And she talked to us about another great singer whose name was Aureliano Pertile, who actually was living and singing at the time of Caruso, and she knew him when he was an old man. And he was complaining because he was a very emotional and, let's say, actorial singer, and he couldn't find students that could do what he wanted. Of course he couldn't, because they didn't have the technique. They didn't have vocal balance. He didn't know that because all he was trying to do was get them to sing the way he sang. He didn't understand. So what the singers would do then is they would learn the style from the older teachers. They'd imitate them, but without the foundation of the great balance.
Could I say something too? So we're going toward the end of the 30s, the beginning of the 40s. We're going toward the Industrial Revolution period.
No. That's not the Industrial Revolution.
When is the Industrial Revolution?
That was much, much sooner.
When was the what? When was
there were two industrial revolutions. One happened in England in the 1800s.
Me the one. No, I'm not talking about the 1800s.
Well, there aren't any after that.
Well, I thought the Industrial Revolution. Do you know when the Industrial Revolution occurred?
No. That was.
I thought it was more in in the 1900s.
No.
Not the 1800s.
That's not what you call it. But anyway, I know what you want to say.
Well, when things got louder.
Okay.
Machines and mechanism and volume and
microphones, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, microphones. Okay. That's later already. Yeah.
But even before that, I'm not going to talk about the mic because things were not mic'd in the opera houses. But and I can say one specific baritone. He was a fake, but anyway, he was noted as like the loudest voice on the stage, and he came around in that period in the 40s, late 30s and 40s. His name was Leonard Warren.
Everybody thinks he's wonderful, so this is a sacrilege, what she's saying now.
Wonderful because he was loud, but he was off. And people thought, oh, he's so loud. And then the volume started to influence other singers, and they tried to sing louder and louder and louder. Now it's outrageous what they're doing.
Yeah, looking for volume.
Loud is everything. And the words have gone. The words used to guide everything. Well, the words don't guide anything now. And then about 20 years ago or whatever, they started to put up titles, subtitles or sopratitoli or sottotitoli for the people to understand the text because they couldn't get it anymore. It was gone. Technique was completely gone then.
But, it was a basic...
Maybe you had a question. Do you have a question?
Gradual.
Well, yeah, just, how we got from there to here and how we get back,
Well, as it was gradual, the process was gradual from going from the teachers dying out, the singers starting to teach style but no longer understanding technique, and then you get the next generation and the generation after that. And each one retained something of the past, and they knew so much about the music. We were very lucky to have met some of these people and worked with them, and we were able to gather a whole baggage of information about the way you approach different operas. And beautiful, but they didn't know how to train voices. And little by little, it just unraveled. The whole thing unraveled. So there was a slight crack, a little fissure, and they got bigger and bigger, and then a gap, and then an abyss, and that's
now they use microphones. They're all mic'd.
Yeah, a lot of singers are mic'd in a lot of opera houses. Maybe not everywhere, but certainly, yeah. But how do you get back? Well, are you still there, Jack? I think that you're stalled again.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I don't know if that's us or his side of the thing, and I don't know if we should leave or if we should wait this time and let him come back, because we're recording, I see. He's coming back. You're back.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Another technical.
Hi. The question was, how do you get back? Wow.
Well, that's what I studied,
Yeah.
to correct it on myself for one. But then I realized I wasn't fast enough to get it all to get back on the stage. So I thought, oh, this is going to be a lifetime here to figure it out. And it took me a lifetime to figure it out, half a lifetime to figure it out.
But you did.
I did.
And you know how to get people back.
I think one basic thing that I had on my side was I studied extensively mathematics and physics. I used to be a mathematician when I first got out of college. I always sang, and then I didn't want to be a mathematician anymore because I had the passion for music was just overwhelming in my entire life. So then I just dedicated myself to understanding to sing, and I might say, successful at it. But I kept myself. I could have had a major career, but I kept myself out of the limelight because I knew that I wasn't right. So I had refused things that people used to say I was crazy for refusing, but I wasn't crazy. I knew what I was doing. I wanted to give people the very best, and I wasn't able to. I felt technically not capable.
So how do you?
But I had developed immense reasoning powers with the mathematics and the physics. I knew how to reason.
Well, you like to problem solve,
and I love my main thing in life is problem solving.
Yeah, it really is. It's true.
I like to help people solve problems.
Yeah.
Somebody has a problem. Come on, let's talk about it. Let's see if there's a solution.
It's true. It takes because it was a maze to go through this. It was a real labyrinth of.
And no one else has done this. I mean, this is and how many singing teachers and how many people sing, and it's amazing.
There are people that will claim that they have tricks and ways to get you to get a great voice in 3 lessons or 3 hours or whatever, but it's not the same thing. No.
If you figure this is from the 40s and now we're in, it's almost 180 years. 80 years.
I think it started before the 40s, really.
Probably before the 40s.
I mean, because you can already hear in Caruso's time, even some singers, they were already starting to fall in love with their sound and really bathe in their own tone.
Yeah, well, let's say
they could get away with it.
It's about a century.
Certainly.
And as far as we know, I'm the only one that who would give up their life to do that? Only somebody that has tremendous love for it and passion. And I do.
So Jack's question is, how do we get people back?
Well, I think that we understand Lisa always sang beautifully, and she understood what I was after. And she now does it alongside me. She understands exactly how to do that. In fact, she has also the healing aspect of it, so she could heal a lot of people along with it. And we are opening our classes to the students that are working with us that are interested in teaching, and we don't charge for that at all to help them to. We will be able to tell very quickly if they have the ear, because you need an ear and you need intelligence. And the ego goes out the window. You don't know ego in this, not in teaching. You have the person in front of you, and that's all that exists.
Yeah, teaching is
the person in front of you.
It's very objective.
Very objective, and you've got to have ears and eyes that know what they're looking at and hearing. And that's about it. And so we want to form a foundation. So we're looking for funds from rich people to help us to form a foundation.
Any rich people who are going to be listening to this, please. It's not for us.
I don't know how long I'll live. I'm healthy now. I'm old and I'm healthy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we've lost it once. To lose it twice would be stupid.
We can't let this stop. We can't.
There will be established some institute for this. I mean, to protect it forever.
We have to do that individually. We know how to get people back. We do, and we can actually do it relatively quickly. And the people that do this, once they start working on it, they fall in love with it because it feels wonderful. Not only does it feel great because there's no more pressure and no more tension, which is a great thing, but it's musical. It's wonderfully musical because you find once your instrument starts to respond, you can do anything you want with your voice. Anything. without even thinking about
Oh,
it.
you're free.
Yeah. And that's what we're after, is the spontaneity of a great artist. We do all of this to free the artist. It's not because it's not an archaic kind of a throwback. We don't want people to sound like old records. I think that some people might believe that. It's just to free the artist, and people.
Well, it would change popular music. It would have all these different voices and all these different sounds instead of this homogenized music.
Great singers, and in all genres,
Yeah.
like we used to at once upon a time,
Yeah. Different styles, but great singing. That's the whole point. Yeah.
You should we have one student that we trust for teaching.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't teach opera. That's not his field. And that's very complex to teach opera,
Right.
because they have to do everything everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
He teaches jazz and rock. He knows how to handle the voices.
He knows the styles, yeah.
And we trust him. Now we've already sent a couple people to him. You should call him. I'll give you his number.
You can interview him.
Okay. Interview him. His name is Stefano Lenzi, Lenzi.
Yeah.
He lives in Rome.
Yeah.
And he has a studio there, much like the situation we have. We live upstairs and the studio's downstairs.
He had a quintet, a jazz quintet, very interesting. He did a lot of his own compositions, beautiful stuff. And he came to us because, actually, that's interesting. He'll probably tell you about this. When we first met Stefano, he'd done all kinds of schools to learn various styles.
Let's tell him how we met, because, just briefly, Lisa and I were invited to give a course. We had one of Italy's major jazz singers. In fact, she's Neapolitan. I think I gave you her name, Maria Pia Dedito.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and she was teaching at Santa Cecilia in Rome at the conservatory. Well, she met us. We corrected some things that she had, and she was so impressed. She talked to the direttore of the conservatory and asked if we could come and give a course, and we did, and it was extremely successful. And Stefano was
taking the class.
He took the class.
Yeah. Anyway, when we first met him, he had finished all kinds of. He'd been working a long time, and he'd been also teaching voice, and he'd learned lots of different styles. He took every class he could. He went to Berklee College of Music, and he did all these different things. And he could play the piano. He's not a pianist.
Berkeley is in the United States.
You know about Berkeley, not Berkeley, California, but Berkeley double E. It's a famous school for.
I think it's in New York or something like that.
Boston.
Boston.
Yeah. Anyway, Stefano was great. He could imitate every style of music, and he was doing piano bar and all these other things, and singing like all these different people. And in the end, he felt that he wasn't singing like himself. And he also said that he was teaching voice, but he was aware that his students really were not improving, and he didn't know why. He was very upset about this because Stefano was quite a perfectionist. So when we worked with him, we basically worked first to free his own voice. And as he was working on his own voice, of course, he's changed the way he was teaching his students based on what we were telling him. And not everybody does that, but he
was a real stickler.
Yeah, also a lot of humility to admit that he'd been making mistakes with his students.
I just want to say Stefano is the kind of a guy, he goes right to the essence of anything he does. He's a runner. He loves to run. He has examined shoes. So, running shoe, talk to Stefano. He knows exactly what he can get out of every single shoe that he buys, everything. He'll do that with any equipment, some acoustical equipment. This is better than that. I mean, you can talk.
Is he a tenor? Because you were telling me how all the different voices are different personalities.
Well, he's a tenor. A light tenor. They're very pignoli, They really. He won't let any what is it, unturned. Any.
Oh boy, you're bringing them all up today, aren't you?
Yeah. No stone unturned.
This is a problem for me. Anyway.
So whatever class we were, he was there, and we'd invite him, of course. But we charged because we wanted him to understand, because he's a stickler.
You brought him up now to say that Jack should meet him sometime.
Oh, yeah, right? Interview him.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to interview. He speaks English very well because he lived in the States about 3 years. Anyway, he is one of the students that we've brought to a certain point where we feel that we trust him with the teaching. He's not a classical musician, and that's not where his interest lies. Although he loves all music. And he's at a good point in the teaching where we feel that we can send people to him who need some work. And we've had him collaborate with us too when we do classes with pop musicians. It's fun. But getting back to bringing people back to a balanced way of singing, we need more people like Stefano. That's the whole point. We do have a few students who are very interested in learning to do this. We will examine them along the way and see if they actually can get to the point where they can do it. We hope they can. We want them to. A lot of people
want to, but if they don't have the sensitivity to the balance, it's like looking at something. I've always been like this all of my life. I can see if something's like a hair away from the center, I can tell.
Well, in fact, I remember once.
It's a perspective.
Yeah, we have a student whose father is a builder, and we said that to him, and he said, "How do you do that?" And Marianna said, "Well, it's like having a level in your ear. You put a level on a wall to see if it's straight." He was a builder, and we said, "Well, we're sure that you can walk into this room and immediately see that some of the walls are crooked." He said, "I can." Well, that's the same thing. It's the same thing. Basically, that's all it is.
I can tell if walls are crooked also.
Yeah, I can.
That sense of,
I can't
balance. I have it.
She can. I can't do that. But with the ear, yeah. And so it's a gradual process. What we hope, our work is not for everyone.
Well, let me just throw parentheses, say something, okay?
Okay.
How I got that is observing. And I told you I used to sit at bars and watch people. For years I did this, just watching at different types, how they walk, how their bodies move. I actually would isolate one foot at a time to watch how the foot would go down, just to make studies of the human body in a way like that. Mm-hmm. I did it for years.
But at least they can all do that, so you can see if someone's sick now, if there's a sickness or any problems.
Yeah, Lisa has a particular, she is, well, her grandfather was a great doctor, medical doctor.
Yeah, he was.
And I think she's inherited a great deal of that. He was a diagnostician
in the days when they didn't use machines.
We could sit somewhere in a restaurant and she'll say, "Oh, that person has whatever." Blah, blah.
Yeah, it's kind of.
She'll say, "That's a very sick person."
Sort of a sixth sense. Yeah. I'm not psychic. Okay, don't.
No.
There's nothing new age about me, please. I'm old age, maybe. But I do with the voice too. I've had some very unusual experiences hearing people and warning them that they had something wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was going to say is this work definitely isn't for everyone. So there are always going to be people that want to sing another way, and more power to them. Let them do it. Why not?
We need a lot of patience.
We won't be buying any tickets anytime soon to go hear them, but if that's the way they like to sing, we're not evangelists. What we want is to help the people that really want to change. They've had it. They've had it, or people that simply. I think there are a lot of singers with doubts. I see them every day. All you have to do is enter any singing forum and read what people are talking about. They're all full of doubts. And of course, if you say, "Well, I can solve your problems," they won't believe you. Of course they won't, because they've heard that a million times before. All we can do is hope, little by little, that people will want to try this and will have the patience and the qualities necessary, because you need a certain type of a personality to strip away all of the external extras to get down to the essence. I think most people, when they do that, they're very, very happy, but not everybody wants to do it. At least they're afraid at first. I think we've encountered that too, that people are really scared because they're afraid to let go of that sound that they've made for themselves. But once they get beyond that point, they find the freedom and they realize that they'd never go back to that other way, And in fact, there's another interesting thing about that. Once you've loosened your voice and you no longer have that tension, you can't go back to the other way. Your voice won't let you.
One guy knocked on our door one day. He's a professional singer coming up in the world, getting good jobs, and he was Italian. He had to go sing in New York or Chicago, a major opera and everything. He rang the doorbell. I looked at him and I thought, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
We have a little bodybuilder here. And I say little because the roles that he was hired to sing were like large baritone roles, a big, almost like a fighter, and this guy was it was not the character del ruolo,
well, underneath the Michelin man bodybuilding,
the Michelin,
he was a
like a
small
little
guy.
Michelin guy. So oh, hello, how are you? And you have a Nabucco to do. That was the opera he was hired to do in Chicago or somewhere. I said, okay, would you mind lying down? Because I thought this one I gotta get down on a couch here, I said, okay, let's do a little bit of breathing. Let me see how you breathe and everything.
Sure.
Take it easy. You don't need that much. You don't need that much. And
Relax.
I relaxed him so much that when he stood up, he was such a little tenor. I thought, oh my God, I better stop. I better not go any further.
Yeah. Well, that's just it.
He won't be able to do his job.
Well, that's just it. That's what we were saying before. You have to keep hammering at the voice. Once you've decided that your voice has to sound like something.
Yeah.
Then if you stop hammering at it, that something might go away, and then the whole false persona that you've built for yourself.
Yeah, he hammered so much
is in question.
Then he had a body build to.
Yes, he was one of those singers, and you will meet them, who believe that you have to go to the gym and train hours and hours every day to get a lot of strength to sing.
He came to Oslo because he was told about a good osteopath here. Mm-hmm. And the osteopath said, I think you better go see Marianna and Lisa. Because people were saying, all you need is a maneuver in your diaphragm. Oh my God.
It was in the brain that he needed the maneuver.
Isn't it always? Yeah.
Change the. Yeah. But, that was an interesting. Look, we do, you meet them all the time. It's very interesting. And I have to say that in the pop world, one of the things that drives me nuts is the constant imitation of the Black American sound among people who are not Black Americans. And I know that there are also some people that teach that. They actually, one of our students actually had a diploma from a school, and one of the classes that she took and got her diploma in was called Black Singing. I just found that insulting, apart from everything else. It sounds mildly racist, but I'm sure that's not how they intended it. They don't know what they're talking about. That's all. What does that even mean? And apart from that, there are also, what about the musical comedy style? There's that style too. Everybody's now exaggerating that one. Everybody sounds like a caricature. And there's the opera singer. They all have this. They all have
it's all caricature now.
They're stuck, and it's so sad. And we can bring them back to their nature.
Their speaking voices are affected by it too. Oh, I sing opera.
Yes.
Opera.
Yeah. Except now we hear opera singers that sound like that because they're so tired all the time. I'm an opera singer. Really? Yeah, and that used to be true in the 50s and 60s. You could tell the opera singers because they talk like this. I'm very sort of hoity-toity, and the voice is lifted. I'm an opera singer, but they don't sound like that now. A lot of them sound just worn out.
One girl came one day, a beautiful girl, tall, elegant, high heels, gorgeous dress, and I think she was Bulgarian or something. And I said, what would you like to sing? And she mentioned an aria. This was an audition. So she went like this. And I said, stop there. Stop there. That's not right. And she said, how would you know? You haven't heard me yet. I said, I know. It's not right.
Yeah.
So she just walked out the door.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't want to hear it.
Unfortunate.
It was going to be like a karate chop.
Yeah.
Poor girl. I was ready for karate chop.
Yeah. But getting back to the question, which is an important question, how do we bring it back?
Well,
are you writing a book, or are you?
Yes,
we
actually,
finishing it now.
Two things. We've written a little treatise, which is very small about our findings. And
it's already done. It just has to be polished up.
And then there is a
polished
book
off for publication.
There's also a book which is more of a book of anecdotes and stories and how we got to where we got, and sort of the long way around. Whereas the treatise is the findings, And then there's a third book, which is actually going to be a fun one. And that's, I would say, 3/4 written. And that's about voice types. And
personalities.
And it's fun. I mean, it's mostly true. Of course, some of it
Well, that's a laugh a minute.
Yeah, it's comical, but people can find themselves in the voice types very much so. And that's based on our own observations of years of working with various voice types.
Because each person, every human being has a voice, and you can type that voice.
Sure.
Like you're a bass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a bass is a bass. No one can train a bass.
Well,
it's useless to try and train a bass. You have your own mind, you're going to do your own thing.
Voice types, by the way, just to say this very quickly, are based on physiology, right? Yeah. I think you probably know this. So that it's different than singing in a choir when the choir director might put you in the tenor section or in the alto section. That's for the convenience of the group. But that doesn't mean that that's the voice you have. A lot of people think that they are basses or contraltos because they don't have any high notes.
Or because they can sing low.
Or because they can sing low.
Doesn't mean anything.
Or the opposite. We had a girl come to us who really thought she was a high soprano, and she actually was a contralto. And she was cutting off half her voice because she could sing very high pitches, but she had no middle voice. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean what notes you can sing. That's the first myth that really has to be understood.
Well, that can be traumatic for some of them that have been singing for a long time. You say, you're in the wrong category. What?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been studying all the wrong scores. Yes, you have,
A lot of singers go through that, but usually when they change categories, so to speak, they change based on their defects. So then you might have a soprano, or in this case, the tenor that came to us, he was a tenor with no top. He didn't have any high notes. So he assumed he was a baritone, and obviously his teachers did too, and they forced him into not just baritone repertoire, but very big, heavy baritone repertoire, and ruined his life, basically.
So basically, whoever he studied with never took a look at his body.
Right, never, and they couldn't hear his speaking voice, and it ruined his life, poor guy. I'm sorry to say, because he had a very short career, and then he had to quit, and he was miserable. Singing should not make you miserable. It should make you happy, very happy. It should be joy. And unfortunately, it isn't for a lot of people because of that. And that's what we want to restore. We want to bring that back, bring back the fun and the joy and the freedom of singing music with your voice. That's the whole point.
So the main thing now is to find a foundation that will fund us to establish something international and teach how to teach.
Because you could get jobs in any conservatory you wanted to, no?
But we didn't.
Well, they won't have us. No.
Well,
they never have us
based on credentials, yes, but not the way we work.
We have all the credentials. Nope, they would not agree with anything.
Oh my God! Well, we did give that course in Santa Cecilia, and that was fun, and it was interesting, and we had about 50 students. By the way, it was really overwhelming.
Yeah.
But we saw, what was in there, and we saw the other voice teachers and how they work. The last time...
Oh, you have to tell about that one teacher, that one we got in the elevator.
No, I don't want to tell that. No, I'd rather... Story. Yeah, I know, but it's hard to do without... This is recorded and it's not visual, so there's no point.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to say, though, that I used to accompany a lot of singers to make a living. I'm a pianist, so I used to play for singers, and sometimes a singer would come to me to ask to play their exams at the conservatory. So I've done that a number of times. And I remember one time we went to the conservatory to take a student that was going to try to pass his tests. And we had to be there while other singers were also passing their exams. And it was really a very upsetting situation because out of the, I think, 5 or 6 singers that were auditioning that day to pass their final exams, 2 of them definitely had nodes. There was no question. They had ruined instruments.
You could hear it straight away.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was terrible. It was terrible. And the third one was on her way to getting nodes. And we've also had people come to us. We met a boy who was a healthy 19-year-old. He'd gone into the conservatory with a healthy voice. And a year later, he came out with nodes. 20 years old with nodes. And then, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of these kids, because they're so scared to quit because they want that piece of paper, they want that degree, they continue. They go back in, because they think that's their way to success. whatever that means, because what success? Then they just go on to teach more people to get no's, I guess. I mean, it snowballs, it's a terrible thing. And that's why we're not in the conservatory, because if we were sitting there, we would have to be failing people. No, that's wrong. And it would be probably be thrown out.
Let's take, for example, somebody like Julie Andrews.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Remember, she lost her voice.
Famous surgery, yeah. Famous.
And then she had surgery and all of that.
Well, she had
Went badly.
polyp removed. That's why she went to surgery.
And she lost her voice. That's a classic example of ignorance. She started off years and years and years ago.
She was a prodigy, yeah.
Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
But she was in the wrong classification from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at her, and I looked at her when she was maybe 10 or 11 or whatever. I saw her doing film. Her body is not a soprano's body. It's a contralto's body.
Mm-hmm.
And she was singing, and she thought she was a soprano. Her teachers thought she was a soprano. Because a young soprano, like a young bass, by the way, when you're young, you're a soprano. Then you go through puberty, and your voice starts to drop way, 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 way down.
I'm talking about the bass.
The bass,
yeah.
That's obvious. You're not a tenor just because your voice is high when you're young. The tenors are lower when they're young than the basses.
Yeah.
Basses are higher when they're young. In the female, I could tell by the way she walked. I could tell by the feet. Because they're already large. She was about
big girl.
11 or 12 or something. Big girl. They have a certain shape of the forehead, usually. I saw, and the length here.
Mm-hmm.
I saw
Long
all
neck.
of these things.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's where the first mistake was made. They mistook her for a soprano. Because young contralto has very airy high tones. That then the voice gradually, with the growth of the girl will get larger and larger, and the voice will get deeper and deeper. And there's where that was somebody made that first error with mistaken identity. And as she got older, well, she couldn't do what she used to do because she was going against nature.
Going against her nature, yeah.
And she harmed her vocal cords and then had surgery. And then I was thinking about writing her a letter some years ago, maybe 15 years ago or something.
Maybe.
But
well,
I thought, she was already older.
She was very successful in what she did, and she was able to continue singing her high notes because she figured out a way to do it. Although gradually she did start transposing pieces. You can hear that over here.
And she was very upset. But
oh my God, no!
When I look at her as an older woman, I see the contralto. It's so clear.
Yeah, well, no,
so
it was very unfortunate that she was working on Broadway doing Victor Victoria on Broadway, the show that she made famous in a movie first, and doing 8 shows a week as they do on Broadway. And she ended up on her vocal cords, and elected to have surgery. That was the most unfortunate thing, because had she worked with us, we could have got rid of the nodes.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She had surgery, and the surgery ruined her voice because they cut into the lamina propria of the vocal cords, and there's nothing you can do about that. And she was heartbroken, of course, because she's a singer, very talented singer.
Why did Magdalena come to us?
She had burning in her throat.
Oh, burning.
Fortunately, she never had.
Throat.
That was burning from the bad use of the air.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually nothing really wrong with her vocal cords, but they were giving her cortisone anyway because they don't know what to do. And she didn't need the cortisone. She just needed to breathe properly.
Another actress had a granuloma in her cord, which is like hard as a rock. And we got rid of that with no surgery,
That's difficult. That's really hard, yeah. But anyway, there are a million ways to work on something. They have to be gradual, and they have to be organic, and they can't be drastic. And we live in a drastic world.
you learn from working too, because you get somebody, the principles. You have to know the principles. You have to be able to hear stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody comes, you've never encountered whatever they have. And you just start working from the basic things, and then you find that they're starting to get better, healing, and everything like that. Usually
it's the same process. A singer comes, they sing, they say, "What's wrong with me?" We usually know immediately what's wrong. Usually it's quite simple to solve the problem, but then the singer has to get used to not using that crutch anymore or that muscular defect.
It's retraining.
And so they have to retrain, and it takes a little time. Sometimes quick, sometimes not so quick, but in the end, it's easy. It really is, and it's not traumatic. A lot of the ways people teach are very invasive.
Well, the only traumatic part is they might not be what they thought they were.
Yeah. Well, that can be scary.
That can be scary.
Yeah, sometimes, but that
Facing yourself.
Yeah, that's right. You meet yourself, and sometimes that can be frightening. But I would say certainly over 80% of the people we worked with were not frightened, and they were delighted, actually, and to meet themselves. Because I think a real artist doesn't want defenses. You want to remove them.
I think we've had 100% success.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
we haven't been able to. Yeah, like the Bulgarian girl, she walked out.
No, if they leave, they leave.
Stayed.
Right, yeah.
Not them, no. People that walk out that don't want to do it, of course. Or people that do it half-heartedly, but on the side think that they can continue to sing the way they sang before. Well, they either learn that doesn't work, or they quit, or they give in and they do it our way, But it's, and the thing, what Marianna said in the beginning, it's not our opinion. That's not the point. It's not, I don't want you to sing like that because I like it better. It's about balance. It's about health, restoring your body to its natural, neutral posture without any painted on or layered on. That's kind of frightening, I guess, but in the end, it's wonderful. It's liberating,
I guess you've exhausted our supply of information.
I don't know.
I think.
Yeah, you think what you're going to do. I'm thinking about this. I've been thinking, I'm thinking, oh, you're going to have quite an editing job on your hands, too.
Oh, no. I'm sure people I'm sure people listening to this will resonate so much what you're saying, because it's just simplicity. You're saying all this stuff is extraneous, superfluous stuff. Take this all away.
Right.
And I can vouch from my experience studying with Marianna that it's a fantastic.
Yeah, your voice sounds so much nicer.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. It's beautiful.
I guess the main thing is when you go to an expert, the expert looks at you, whether he's a doctor or a voice teacher or a baker or whatever. They'll look at you as a professional. Or not. In the case of voice, you don't have to be, but you could have something wrong with your speech. It's not working. And you see where you're off and how to get you on. That's what we do. In an instant, we can do that.
Yeah.
How far is the deviation from what it should be? You see like the whole thing already put together. You think, okay, then I have to do this, this, and this to get this person on track.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah.
It's like a healing.
Sure it is. Yeah, it's very organic, very holistic, or whatever. I mean, I don't know how to call it, but it is.
You remind me of like horse race trainers. Look at a horse and say, "This is a flat runner. This one should jump. This one's going to be good on this."
This is one of the first analogies I made up years ago. That's really funny. How interesting you say that. I used to ride quite a bit. I don't anymore. I wish I could, but I don't. And I remember saying to Marianna years ago, we would be curious about the fact that some singers could have really, really long careers with a lot of defects in their voice, but they never stopped. They could continue and not even really get injured. They'd just keep going. And other singers would fall apart right away. And
it's kind of like living sort of like a cripple.
Well, but they could do it and other ones couldn't. And I remember we would talk about this, and we started to understand that the better the voice, the better the quality instrument, the more sensitive it is. And I remember saying, it would sort of be like saying, all right, you take a horse that is born and bred to pull a cart, a heavy milk wagon horse, one of those. All right, if you put that horse in a race, it will run, it will finish last, but it will get there. But if you take a thoroughbred racehorse, a finely tuned racing machine horse, and you make it pull a cart, you'll kill it. It won't be able to stand it. And that's what happens to voices. You get these beautiful voices that are beaten down into a shape that the teacher tries to make them fit into, and it ruins them. We've seen this so many times. It ruins the person, too, because it makes you extremely unhappy and neurotic.
Frustrated.
Yeah. Whereas you can find people, and it's true, you can find these sort of, they're kind of utilitarian voices like a Volkswagen bus. They can do everything. They're Ferrari, in other words. They're not a Lamborghini. They're a Volkswagen. They can get in there and they can do one opera after the next and hammer away at their voices and have long careers. And good for them, but they're doing it incorrectly. They can just survive it. And it's very interesting. It's very similar. Yeah. You look at the singer and you say, all right, you already know what is them and what isn't them. What you should remove, you take away everything until you get down to their essence, and then you say, "All right, that singer is a racehorse. That singer is a jumper." You can hear it in the voice.
If I'm not mistaken, Lisa, I think I remember one of the Lamperti family. That the greatest schools of teaching were in Spain and in Italy. With the Lamperti family, father and son, in Italy. And with the Garcia family in Spain, father and son. And I think one of them said it's like animal training.
Oh yes, it's Lamperti. He said it's like you make the singer jump over the stick.
Yeah,
over the stick.
You have to jump, and that's basically what we do. It's like having a stick. No, gotta go over that. We say what you have to do. Go over it again.
That's very funny.
Again, that's what it is.
That sort of is. That's true.
Training is basically that.
We singers are animals, is what we're saying, actually.
Yeah.
Speaking of horses, I just want to talk about. I fell in love with this way this woman works with horses that have been beaten down, are not their right personalities or whatever, and she just walks in. How do you call those barns that have like tracks inside of them?
Stable.
Like a big stable. So that paddock or whatever. She accompanies the horse. She doesn't get on it right away, but she walks near it and she has just a little, she never struck a horse ever, but she has a little whip there just to, keep it in line. And that's like the first encounter. And she'll talk to you. You can find this on the YouTube. I can't remember her name now. She's like a northern, like a Danish name, or is it Lippe or something like that? I can't remember. But she's terrific because she is working with the psychology of the animal. Mm-hmm. She'll say, well, he's behaving properly. Let's see how far. Okay, she always cordons off an area where the animal would, once it had enough of her, needs to get away. So she has an area where the animal want to go to, and she allows him to go. And he's thinking about what he's going to do. He's considering this. And then she'll go back and get him back on the track again. And she can work with a horse in a day or two and get them to accept a rider.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of the way you teach. Yeah, it's very organic and soft.
And she said you won't be able to dominate the horse, at least the trainer like herself, until you can get your hand in his mouth and you touch every part of their body.
You haven't done that yet, but
they have to trust you, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is.
So it's like closest thing is like animal training.
Oh my goodness! Training an animal to walk a tightrope. There you have it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm honored to have been in your stable, and it's been a fantastic experience working with you and speaking to you now. And I wish many poor people could have this experience. It's
we have a few lessons yet,
fantastic.
don't we?
We do, I think, right?
Yes, we do.
We've said an awful lot of stuff that probably needs to just be trimmed down before you.
Cut it.
Yeah.
Well, I have to write a song. I write a song about every guest.
Oh wow!
So I have to write a song about singing.
I'm so interested.
I haven't done that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, this is, the thing is with us, it's like you put a little token in, and we'll just talk about voice for the next 5 hours. It's a passion. Can't stop.
No, I'm sure people who discover this podcast, singers who've been struggling and just feel like they found a true treasure. So I'm sure they're going to save it every moment.
Oh, yeah. Well, it turns your life around. After the struggle, it's no struggle. It's discipline, but no struggle.
That's right. It's all about removing struggle.
It's about love.
It is about love.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. It really is in the end. And it's about respecting the personality and the voice of the singer, so that instead of doing what most voice teachers do, which is to try to get a sound out of the singer that they want to hear, we want the singer to sound like themselves.
Yeah, we have tremendous respect and honor for the student. That's the main thing. Nothing is about us. It's always about the person in front of us.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, ladies. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for us too.
This is the first podcast of this type I think we've done.
I hope we answered some questions. You might have had more that we didn't even let you say.
No, it's been a real. I'm sure there's so much more to learn. It's an infinite subject. So
well, we're here anytime you want to do part 2.
all right.
I gave it away already. I gave it
we
away.
can,
That's part 2.
Yeah, we can always talk more. You know how it is. Anyway, it was very,
all right.
very nice doing this. And yes, I see how we get off of here. Okay.
Yes. So bon appetito, and we'll see you in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Ciao, ciao. Arrivederci.
Ciao. Take care.
I've been driving for years, lost in foreign lands, searching for answers, some guiding hands. I'd gone cross country, even lost the road. I was given directions by people who were lost themselves. But it was in my darkest hour that I heard her name whispered on the wind as I was guided to a place. The parking lot was packed, the queue went round the block, but a desperate man won't be denied. I found a window unlocked, climbed into her chamber and poured out my heart. How I'd lost my voice somewhere. She watched me in the dark. Your problem's obvious. You forced your tone. Singing should be an effortless thing. Leave well alone. After an hour together, I felt changes deep inside. I walked out the door 2 inches taller with words to reach the sky, and I could sing, 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 such a pure and simple thing. Go within and let it ring. Yes, I sing, 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 a recrowned king. I went within and let it ring. Her technique was simple, as light as love, an iron fist inside a velvet glove. She took away the parts that were not me, like Michelangelo had done for David. With balanced tone, the right vibrations, like a tightrope walker, I had bold and new sensations, and I could sing, 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 such a pure and simple thing. Go within and let it ring. Yes, I sing, 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 a recrowned king. I went within Thanks for tuning in. Of all the podcasts in all the world, I'm glad you chose to listen to this one. Thanks for taking the time. If you enjoyed it, please rate it on your podcast app, share it. If you like the song, you can listen to it on Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, everywhere. If you really want to support, you can buy it for $1 from podsongs.com and send it to a friend by email. Try and spread the love. I know nobody downloads anymore, but what can you do? And I'm also joined Patreon as well, so if you really want to support, you can sign up there as well. Thanks for all your messages and your words of encouragement. I do appreciate it. And thanks to my musicians, Mauricio Sanicola and Massimino Vodza, and my researcher, Dori Verbo. Alright, see you next time.